J.J. Abrams was once seen as the man who could do no wrong, a blockbuster filmmaker who revived dying properties and turned nostalgia into box office gold. When Star Trek was dead in the water, he brought it back. When Star Wars needed to recapture the magic of the original trilogy after the CGI-heavy prequels, he delivered a crowd-pleasing return to form. But behind the lens flares and mystery boxes was a deeper issue. Abrams was great at starting stories, but not finishing them. And in the end, the same approach that made him Hollywood's go-to savior would be the very thing that helped unravel two of the biggest franchises in cinematic history. So let's dive in and take a look at how J.J. Abrams broke Star Wars and Star Trek. As a boy, J.J. Abrams' grandfather took him to Tannen's Magic Shop in New York City, where Abrams discovered a box covered in a question mark. Fascinated by it, his grandfather bought the box for him, but Abrams never opened it. He found the mystery of what was inside far more exciting than knowing the actual contents. That simple idea stayed with him throughout his life, becoming a guiding principle for his now famous mystery box approach to storytelling, where mystery serves as the catalyst for imagination. Rather than giving the audience all the answers up front, Abrams thrust them into an unfolding mystery to ignite their curiosity and drive the narrative forward, sparking a deep desire for answers. However, over the years, Abrams has developed a reputation for delivering unsatisfying payoffs to those mysteries, and that's because he often didn't have the answers figured out when he first thought them up. This approach was on full display with Lost. Lost began as an idea from Lloyd Braun, then the head of ABC, who envisioned a television series that combined the survival elements of Castaway and Survivor. Braun approached Abrams, fresh off the success of Alias, to write the pilot. Although initially hesitant, Abrams agreed, on the condition that the series would have a strong supernatural angle. With the clock ticking, Abrams and his team were given just 11 and a half weeks to write the pilot, cast it, crew it, shoot it, and deliver it to the network, which according to him left no real time to develop a long-term plan or explanation for the island's supernatural nature. Abrams would withdraw from the show partway through the first season to direct Mission Impossible 3, which would continue to use his mystery box approach to storytelling. In film, there's often an important object the heroes and villains are after, which drives the plot forward. This is known as a MacGuffin. For example, the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders of the Lost Ark, or the Death Star plans in Star Wars. For MI3, the MacGuffin was the rabbit's foot, a dangerous and mysterious object teased throughout the film but never actually explained. While writing the script and brainstorming possibilities for what the rabbit's foot could be, Abrams came to a key realization. It didn't matter what it was. What mattered was how badly the characters wanted it. By keeping its true nature a mystery, Abrams believed he was encouraging the audience to imagine the most terrifying possibility for themselves, as he would later say that intentionally withholding information is much more interesting than simply explaining everything to the audience. However, this approach also came with a downside. Without knowing what the rabbit's foot actually was, audiences couldn't fully grasp the true danger it posed, which weakened the stakes. By the mid-2000s, Star Trek was effectively dead. Nemesis had bombed at the box office, serving as the swan song for the Next Generation crew, while Enterprise was cancelled after just 4 seasons, making it the first Star Trek series since the original not to reach the 7-season mark. The franchise had grown stale, but Star Trek had once been considered the jewel in Paramount's crown. And after the success of Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins, which proved that even a franchise that had been critically derailed could thrive again if reimagined with a bold new vision, Paramount decided to attempt the same revival strategy. They turned to Mission Impossible 3 writers Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman to script a new film, and brought J.J. Abrams in to produce, who would eventually agree to direct. Abrams later admitted he wasn't a Star Trek fan growing up. He found it too intellectual, too talky, and described watching it as a bit of a chore. He was far more drawn to Star Wars, which he felt was more emotional, fun, and exciting. As a result, Abrams and his writers ended up reshaping Star Trek into something that looked and felt much more like Star Wars. They were heavily influenced by its pacing and tone, aiming for speed, spectacle, and visceral energy rather than the stately, philosophical style that defined Trek for decades. The character dynamics reflected that influence too. Kirk and Spock's early antagonistic relationship was intentionally modeled after Han Solo's icy relationship with Luke in A New Hope, and Kirk's arc echoed Luke's own hero's journey, a restless young man dreaming of something greater. Even the phasers were reimagined to feel more like Star Wars blasters, fast and punchy. The influence ran so deep that Abrams actually actually pulled back on the number of alien species in the bar scene just to avoid making the resemblance to the Mos Eisley Cantina too obvious. And while it worked, with the film being a commercial success and introducing the franchise to a new audience, many longtime fans felt it lacked the core essence of Star Trek, particularly its thoughtful, allegorical storytelling and its tradition of using science fiction to reflect contemporary social and political issues. However, with the sequel, it all came crashing down. Much like Batman Begins, 2009 Star Trek successfully reignited audience interest in a legacy franchise, and with a strong follow-up, it had the potential to reach even greater heights. And where The Dark Knight elevated its predecessor with bold choices and a reinvention of its most iconic villain, Into Darkness stumbled, both creatively and commercially. One of the film's most criticized decisions was the handling of its villain. Unlike The Dark Knight, which centered its marketing around Heath Ledger's Joker, a fresh, haunting take on a familiar figure, Into Darkness chose to obscure the identity of its antagonist, Khan. Rather than building anticipation, Abrams went out of his way to deny that Benedict Cumberbatch was playing Khan, believing that the mystery over his identity would build interest in the film, a textbook example of his mystery box approach to storytelling. However, this backfired. When the reveal finally came halfway through the film, it landed with a thud. While Abrams wanted to keep the character's identity a secret in order to surprise the audience, by doing so, the studio arguably left money on the table, wasting the opportunity to build excitement around one of Star Trek's most iconic villains. Not only that, Khan's reveal had no weight within the story. To Kirk and Spock, the name Khan meant nothing. The dramatic delivery of the line played more like a wink to the audience versus his dramatic reveal in Wrath of Khan, where Kirk looks like he's seen a ghost. Additionally, this was Khan in name only. Khan was the charismatic, literature-quoting villain from the Wrath of Khan, whose charm and intellect made him as compelling as he was dangerous. In his place was a cold, joyless Englishman defined almost entirely by rage. The drastic shift in characterization may have been justified in a full reboot, as The Dark Knight did with the Joker, but Into Darkness wasn't a clean slate. It explicitly positioned this as the same Khan from the original timeline. The film was also criticized for its reliance on shallow fan service. Nowhere was this more apparent than in the film's reversal of Spock's death from the Wrath of Khan, with Kirk sacrificing himself instead. But the moment carried little emotional weight. This was only the second film in the series, and the audience had barely come to know these versions of Kirk and Spock. Even the characters themselves barely knew each other. Spock's anguished reaction, clearly meant to mirror the iconic farewell in the original film, felt unearned, lacking the history and bond that gave the original scene its power. While the film would earn more than its predecessor, showing that interest in a sequel was there, its box office would fall well below what The Dark Knight earned, and its sequel, Star Trek Beyond, would make less than the 2009 film, suggesting that many fans, disappointed by Into Darkness, chose not to return to theaters. To date, no new Kelvin timeline film has materialized, and while Star Trek continues to thrive on television, the mishandling of the film series has stalled any meaningful progress on the cinematic front. Regardless, Abrams would finally get the chance to make the movie he's always wanted, Star Wars. Before his involvement, Lucasfilm hired Little Miss Sunshine and Toy Story 3 writer Michael Arndt to write the screenplay for Episode 7, but he struggled to crack the story. When Abrams later requested that Disney push back the release date to allow more time for development, the studio refused. From Disney's perspective, they had just acquired Lucasfilm for billions of dollars, and shareholders were eager to see return on that investment. With Arndt unable to deliver a draft quickly enough, the decision was made to replace him. Abrams and veteran Star Wars writer Lawrence Kasdan were brought in to take over and turn around a new script on an accelerated timeline to meet the studio's deadline. True to form, The Force Awakens introduced several compelling mysteries, classic Abrams mystery box storytelling, that drove fan speculation and built anticipation for the rest of the trilogy. Who were Rey's parents? How did Maz come into possession of Luke's lightsaber? Who was Supreme Leader Snoke? And why had Luke exiled himself to a remote island, cutting himself off from the galaxy? Similar to writing and directing The Lost pilot and then leaving the show, Abrams wouldn't return to write and direct Episode 8, leaving it to someone else to answer the questions he posed. Unfortunately, many fans were dissatisfied with how Episode 8 writer-director Rian Johnson chose to answer those questions. Rather than explaining who Snoke was, he killed him off. Rather than revealing that Rey was part of some important lineage, he made her a nobody and her parents junk traders who sold her off for drinking money. And perhaps most divisively, he portrayed Luke as a disillusioned hermit who had cut himself off from the Force and rejected the Jedi, with him at one point even considering killing his nephew in his sleep, a sharp contrast to the Luke of the original trilogy, who would have done anything to help his friends and save his father. When Episode 9 directors Colin Trevorrow struggled to deliver a script to Lucasfilm's liking, he was fired and replaced with returning J.J. Abrams, who is now under pressure from Lucasfilm to wrap up the trilogy, win back disillusioned fans, and course-correct the divisive choices made in The Last Jedi, all while still hitting the studio's fixed release date. With Snoke dead, a character many already saw as a pale imitation of the Emperor, Abrams chose to bring back the real thing. In Rise of Skywalker, Palpatine was revealed to have been orchestrating events from the shadows all along, with Snoke dismissed as a test tube creation and puppet under his control. Abrams later claimed that reintroducing Palpatine was meant to tie the whole saga together, and it would have felt strange not to include him, despite the fact that he was dead and his return undercut the emotional resolution of Return of the Jedi. Several other lingering questions were also brushed aside. Luke's lost lightsaber, which Maz claimed had a story for another time, was never told, and Rey's parentage was retconned entirely, revealing that she was actually the granddaughter of Palpatine. When the film was released, it was met with widespread criticism. In trying to win back fans alienated by The Last Jedi, it ended up pleasing almost no one. Many considered it even worse than The Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones, a remarkable feat given how negatively those films were received upon release. While Star Wars continues to thrive on streaming platforms, the franchise has struggled to find clear direction following the end of the Skywalker saga, as several films have been announced only to be abruptly cancelled, as recent shows on Disney Plus have received mixed reactions. In the end, J.J. Abrams built his career on the power of mystery, but too often, those mysteries came without meaningful answers. And while he had first captured the audience's interest and imagination in his attempts to reinvigorate new life into both Star Trek and Star Wars, like a bad magician, he botched the trick, fumbling the reveal and leaving fans wondering why they ever believed in the illusion in the first place. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Bullets and Blockbusters for more great content.